Hello again and welcome back to the channel. This is Michael from TOEFLresources.com. In today's video, I'm going to talk about the new TOEFL writing question, the Writing for Academic Discussion question, which will be added to the TOEFL IBT test starting July 26th. It's going to replace the independent writing question, which is currently on the test. There seems to be a lot of demand for sample questions and sample answers and strategies for this question already. It was just announced a couple days ago, and people are really interested in what it's all about and how to respond to it. So that's what I hope to provide in this video. Now, I will mention right away, the time allotted for this question is 10 minutes. That is 10 minutes for reading and writing. So I'm going to get back to timing in just a moment, but first I'm going to describe the question itself. Now, this question seems to begin in the same way every time. You get some basic instructions. It says something like, your professor is teaching a class on education. Write a post responding to the professor's question. In your response, you should express and support your personal opinion and make a contribution to the discussion in your own words. An effective response will contain at least 100 words. Note it says at least. That's not a limit. That's not a maximum. You can write more than 100 words. So these instructions are going to be pretty much the same every time, but the subject will change. In this case, it's a class about education, but it could be a class about sociology or business or political science. It could probably be any subject. Although the actual content is not going to be overly technical or specific. It's going to be a question that just about anyone could answer, even if they don't have a background in the subject. So after these instructions, you get the question itself. Now, the question seems to begin with some background information that kind of simulates what you would see on a real discussion board. So in this case, it says, over the next few weeks, we're going to talk about recent trends in education. Specifically, we'll discuss how many universities have started letting students take classes from home instead of taking them in person on campus. I want to know what you think about this issue, so here's a quick question for the discussion board. And then finally, he gets to the point. What do you think is the most significant impact of online classes? Why do you think they have this impact? So you can see the phrasing of the question is sort of open-ended. Like you could say just about anything in response, as long as it's on topic. Now, in the samples that have been published so far, sometimes the question is open-ended like that, or sometimes it's phrased more like a preference style. So it could say, do you think it's beneficial for universities to let students take classes from home, or do you think students should be required to attend in person? So you can see how that possible style is a little bit different. And if you want more questions like that, just check the video description down below. I'm going to put a link to my website where I've created, I think, 12 samples at this point. And there's going to be more to come. So after you've read the question from Dr. Jones, then you're going to read the responses from two students in the class. First up in this case, we've got Emily. Emily says, the main thing is that online classes make education more accessible. For one, they help reduce commuting time and costs, and this allows students to have more flexibility in their schedules. Plus, online learning can be more accessible for students who have disabilities or live far away from campus. Traditionally, high costs have prevented many people from pursuing an education, but thanks to online classes, cost is less of a problem. And then Jack says, I think that online classes cause people to learn less than before. There's something to be said for the energy and engagement that comes from being in the same physical space as your classmates and instructor. Moreover, when we take classes in person, it's easier to build relationships and collaborate effectively. We learn just as much from these sorts of relationships as we do from our actual lectures and textbooks. So, the first thing you're going to notice is that is a lot of reading. Now, I've talked to a bunch of students and teachers since this question was announced a few days ago, and that's been the common theme. They're like, how am I going to read all of this and write a response in just 10 minutes? So that's the first strategy I want to talk about. So let's kind of get to it. Now, here's what I think. First of all, I think you don't really need to read the stuff at the top. Like, it doesn't seem to change, right? So you should know, you should memorize these instructions before you take the before you take the test. And then you can just skip them. Like, the only thing that's going to change is the subject, but the subject is kind of irrelevant. So that would be my first strategy. Don't waste your time reading this stuff. And then what I want to emphasize is that the question itself really seems to come near the end of the question. So this stuff at the beginning, in this case, it's not particularly important. And if you look at the samples provided by ETS, they seem to follow the same kind of pattern. There's a lot of prefatory stuff where he's like, over the next few weeks, we're going to talk about recent trends in education. That's not really relevant to like your response. What you really need to know is what comes at the end. So that's what I want you to focus on when you read. Now, you can't skip this. I think that's too dangerous. But I am encouraging you to just kind of skim it and go quickly and then really focus on the last part. So that's another strategy to save time. Now also, your response is mostly your response. Yes, you're going to respond to these two students to some extent, but most of what you say will be your ideas. So another possible strategy to kind of read this a bit more quickly is to really just focus on one thing from each of these student responses and make a note of it on your paper. So Emily says, oh, it'll make education more accessible. I'm going to make a note of that. And that's what I'm going to use in my response. And then I'm just going to kind of skim the rest of it because I'm probably not going to make use of it in my response. And I'm going to do the same thing for Jack. I'm going to circle, okay, yeah, you learn less than before. I'm going to make a note of that on my paper and then kind of skim the rest of the response. I don't need to spend a ton of time reading what they wrote because most of it I'm not going to use in my answer. So that's my strategy to really kind of help you read the question more quickly. I don't want you to spend 5 or 6 minutes reading this. I want you to spend most of your time writing. Ideally, you might spend 2 or 3 minutes at the most reading the question, and the rest of the time is going to be spent writing. Let's look at my response. So here's what I came up with. In my opinion, online classes have a negative impact on our education. I agree with Jack's idea that we learn less when we take them. I'd add that it's a lot easier to get distracted when we study at home using our personal computer. It's so easy for our mind to wander off to other things, which could cause us to miss really critical details from an important lecture. This is less likely to happen when we are in a classroom surrounded by serious scholars. Emily raised the relevant point that online classes make education more accessible, but she didn't mention that the main expense for students is tuition, and universities charge the same amount for online classes and offline classes. For example, some people attend my biology seminar in person, and others take it online, but we all pay the exact same fee. Overall, then, I would say that online classes cause us to learn less than before. So that's my response. Now, the most immediate thing here is that this is a pretty long response, and that's what I'm kind of teaching for now. I counted this. I think it came out to like 160 words. And you might say, oh my gosh, 160 words? That's a lot. Yes, it is a lot. However, I did look at the sample answers provided by ETS. They provided 2 sample answers, which they described as high scoring. I believe one of them was 135 words, and the other was 176 words. Yes, one of them was even longer than my response here. So for the time being, I'm recommending a fairly long response if you want to get a high score. Notably, my response is longer than what Emily and Jack came up with. If you look at the sample tests that have been provided, the answers provided by the students here are like 75 words on average. So they're not even 100 words. So my recommendation is don't look at these student responses for tips about how long your response should be. Your response should probably be longer than what you see from the two students. And again, it says at least 100 words. So, I think what they're asking for is 101 words or more. You want to make sure you don't have less than 100 words, because then your response may not be considered effective. What did I do when I crafted this response? Well, I did a few things. I started by clearly stating my opinion, kind of like my thesis statement. In my opinion, online classes have a negative impact on our education. So I clearly stated, my response to the question, that the impact is that they hurt our education. And then I agreed with something that Jack said specifically. I agree with Jack's idea that we learn less when we take them. So I picked out that one detail from Jack's answer, and I said I agree with it. So I'm engaging in the conversation. I'm contributing to the discussion. And then after that, I added a bunch of stuff that came from my mind, like my own ideas. And then down here, I specifically mentioned something that Emily mentioned in her response. I paraphrased it. I'm not using her exact words. I'm paraphrasing it. And then I mentioned a bunch of stuff from my mind, my own opinions. And then I end it by repeating my overall opinion. Overall, then, I would say that online classes cause us to learn less than before. And that's my response. I chose to engage directly with both Jack and Emily. That was how I contributed to the discussion. A possible response, if you want to save even more time, is to only engage with Jack. You could possibly ignore Emily completely, and I think that would be acceptable. So, as you prepare for the test, consider that method. It's probably okay. I don't think you really need to engage with both of the students, although I could be wrong. Otherwise, I focused on having correct grammar and avoiding any errors, because I think those will reduce my score. I tried to avoid repeating words too many times. So as I was writing this second part, I noticed at first that I repeated the word class like 4 times. So I changed it to seminar for the last instance to keep my vocabulary varied. Otherwise, I'm trying to use a few conjunctions like which and so and but, I think, are in there, as well as and, to give my sentence structure a bit more variety. I'm trying to use not really complicated words, but I'm not using basic words all the time. So I'm just using things like negative impact or distracted or wander off. These are not like complicated words, but they're just not really simple and basic. So you do want to show off your vocabulary level somewhat. Now, the other kind of interesting technique I took here is I did divide this into like paragraphs, sort of. So I've got like one paragraph here for, supporting my opinion and dealing with Jack. And then I've got like a separate paragraph here for dealing with Emily. And then I've got a little mini paragraph at the end where I repeat my main idea. When I started making sample questions for this and sample answers, I didn't use those paragraphs. But, as I was experimenting, I found that my responses have been easier to read if I have those little paragraph breaks. That's something to think about. I don't think they're mandatory. I don't even think they're a big deal. But, use them or not, it's up to you. All right, I think I'm going to leave it at that. But if you have any questions about this new TOEFL task, please leave them down below. I'll try to answer as soon as I can. If I learn anything new about the test that's coming in July, I'll try to update the blog and the YouTube channel and all of that. And of course, in the days and weeks ahead, I am going to make more sample questions and sample videos. So make sure to subscribe to the channel so you can get those as soon as possible. Meanwhile, you can find me at TOEFLresources.com. I've got guides to every section of the test, and you can sign up for writing evaluations or writing lessons or whatever you want. I'm here for you. as you prepare for the test. All right, I will leave it at that, but take care. I will see you all again really soon.